Chapter 24, The Mind Reader. The next morning, I woke with a banging headache. I felt like I had been run over by a bus. Sitting up in bed, I wondered what had happened the night before. But the details were fuzzy. Stepping into the bathroom, I vigorously brushed my teeth, willing myself to recall why I felt so weak. Then, mid-rinse, the memory hit. I could communicate with the boys without actually speaking. The dangers Vazar warned me about were slowly taking shape, but I couldn't understand how it could happen so soon in our relationship. Racing back to my bedroom, I dialed Vazar's number from my phone. "Hey, good morning, baby." He sounded pleasantly surprised to hear from me. It was our first phone call after all. "Hi, good morning. How are you?" I said breathlessly. "Have you been out running? You sound out of breath." "Yes, I ran back to my bedroom. Something happened last night, and I need your opinion." "What? What happened? Are you okay?" His voice broke with concern. "I'm okay. I'm fine. But last night when I was walking home, these boys..." I hesitated, trying to make it sound less dangerous than it actually was. "What boys? What did they do?" "They tried talking to me and they wouldn't shut up, so I got angry. And then this thing happened to me. I felt hot all over. My eyes turned orange, like they were on fire. And then I started speaking to the boys with my mind. They could hear me. I could hear them. It was so weird. I can't understand it." "Hannah, slow down." Vazar took a deep breath. "So you're telling me your eyes turned orange?" "Yes. With fire," I said excitedly. "And you used your mind to speak to them?" "Yes." Our lips didn't move. "What's happening to me? Oh wow. Oh my God. This is happening so fast. These changes don't happen until the relationship is cemented with time. How come it's happening so fast?" The question wasn't directed at me, more to himself. "I don't know, but it's happening." "So are you feeling okay now?" The concern in his voice was evident. "Yes, I feel fine. In fact, I feel great. We need to practice this mind communication power. Maybe later today you can practice with me." "Yes, that's an idea. I need to practice. Who knows what else I will be able to do?" I said excitedly. Having unique abilities was beginning to grow on me. "Okay, so I'll see you tonight then?" "Yes. See you soon. I love you." The butterflies in my stomach fluttered. "Love you too, bye," Vazar replied warmly. I hung up feeling positive about what the future may hold for us. I arrived to work around 6:30 p.m. and bumped into Harry, who was speaking to a staff member in the foyer. "Good evening, Hannah." He nodded in my direction. "Evening, Harry. How are you? Up to anything this evening?" His question was laced with innuendo. "Just here for my shift," I replied over my shoulder as I headed towards Vazar. As usual, he was by the door. "How do you know I'm coming?" I asked playfully. "I can smell you." "What? Are you serious?" I laughed. "Yes. I swear I can smell you. You smell like cotton candy." He pulled me close to him and nuzzled his nose in my hair. "Has Harry been to see you?" "Harry? No, why?" "I just saw him downstairs. I have a feeling he doesn't like me. I'm sure it's nothing personal. He's just wary because he knows what we are up to." Vazar frowned. "He won't make our plan easy on us." "No, I guess he won't." Abruptly, Vazar stepped back. "He's coming. I can feel him approaching." 2 seconds later, we heard him. "Ah, Vazar, my boy. There you are." Harry stepped through the door, followed by several staff members. "Hannah, my dear. Isn't it time for your shift?" Harry was now standing in front of us. "Not yet, I still have a few minutes," I replied evenly. Well, I heard my name come up. Were you inquiring after me?" Harry pointed to his ears. His hearing must be supersonic. I guessed it was one of his superpowers. "What are you doing here, Harry?" Vazar wasn't one to beat around the bush. "Well, as you can see, we are marking the items that are leaving us in less than a week. We need to catalog them to arrange for packaging." Harry waved a hand around the room. The staff he had brought with him were busy applying red dot stickers on items that were listed on an official-looking clipboard. Curiosity burst inside me and I left Vazar's side and headed for his vase. Peering at the glass cabinet, I inspected it for a red sticker. Nothing. Not leaving it to chance, I hurried across the room to the middle-aged man who held the official-looking clipboard. "May I see that for a second, please?" Without waiting for his reply, I plucked the clipboard out of his hand and scanned the list. Item number 11. There it was in black and white. Vazar's vase was listed as one of the pieces assigned to leave in the first shipment next week. My heart landed somewhere near my feet. It was now confirmed that the plan had to be executed within 5 days because after that there was a high chance I would never see the love of my life again. I power-walked back to Harry. Why are you so keen to send Vazar away? There was really no point in messing around now. We all knew the situation, and what a dire situation it was. Really, Hannah? You have to ask. Yes, I do. What is your issue with us? I crossed my arms defensively. My dear, I have no issue with you. What you are planning to do is my issue. Do you really think you can get away with it? Before you try anything stupid, I have been instructed by the elders to send Vazar back to where he can complete his sentence without further distractions. If we promise not to do anything stupid, will you let Vazar stay? Stay? Until when, my dear? The exhibition was supposed to last 3 months. What will you do after the 3 months is over? He had a point. I didn't think it through when I asked that question. No matter which way the cookie crumbled, I knew the end result was Vazar leaving, and I would be forced to marry the older man. There was only one chance at a happy ending, and that was to break Vazar free. Chapter 25, Phase 1. The next few days passed by in a hive of activity. I spent every available second, before and after my shift, researching all the elements that needed to be done for the final stage of the plan. In between researching, both Vazar and I practiced honing my mind-reading skills, but they decided to take a back seat for a while, yielding no results. We both guessed I needed to be put under pressure for it to work. We would deal with that later, once we had executed the escape plan successfully. Just as Vazar had predicted, there were many hurdles in our plan. The first one was identified early on when I discovered that no matter how hard I try, I wasn't allowed access into the security room. The lady who cleaned it was meticulous about her routine, and would reject all offers of assistance in cleaning that particular room. To overcome this, we decided the only thing that could be done was to wear a disguise. The next major hurdle was accessing the glass cabinets without raising the alarm. There was no way to open the cabinet manually as all locks were computer-coded and required a passcard. This threw the entire plan out the window, and we were forced to come up with Plan B that was better than the first plan we had. The new plan was quite simple on paper, but to implement it in real life would be tricky because other people would be around us at the time of the swap. I had given myself plenty of pep talks and had already purchased the items I would need to carry out the steps ahead of time. Plan B would initiate on the same day. They would come to take the first shipment of artifacts to be sent back to Iraq. That was in 2 days' time. The next afternoon, a day before initiation, I left school and arrived in Romford on the fast train from Seven Kings for Phase 1 of the plan. The pottery maker had called me earlier that day, and confirmed the vase was ready for collection. With my nerves stretched to limit, I wobbled my way to the shop from the station. It was a short walk but felt like the longest in my life. The pressure of getting this stage right was crucial. If the pottery maker didn't get the exact replica correct, then there was a high chance the swap of vases would be noticed, and the plan would crash around our heads before we made it out of the museum. The shop was a small edifice, situated between a row of similar-looking storefronts. The windows were filled with various pieces of plates, pots and vases. Some were plain, whilst others were beautifully decorated with intricate shapes and patterns. With a shaky hand, I pushed the door open and entered the interior. Good afternoon. How are we today? An elderly gentleman appeared behind the counter. Hi, my name is Miriam. I'm here to pick up my vase. I thought it wise to give him a fake name in case his handiwork was traced back to him. Oh yes, we spoke earlier. I'm John. Did you find us okay? Yes, thank you. It's not far from the station. Indeed. The man shuffled into a back room and brought back the replica. My heart soared. From this angle, it looked exactly like the original. I moved forward for a closer inspection. It was exactly the same, the size, the pattern and the colors all matched. It's beautiful. Thank you. You did an amazing job. I gushed as I lifted the vase off the table. It was heavy. It felt authentic. Thank you. I'm glad you like it. Shall I ring that up for you then? Yes, please. I moved towards the cash register. That will be £200, please. John had warned me about the cost before starting the project, so I was well prepared with the money. I drew the money from my purse and handed it to him. There was no way I would possibly have £200 to my name, so Vazar had given me the money for it. When I asked him where he got the money from, he said money wasn't an issue and ended the topic there. I suspected it wasn't entirely ethical, but I would find out later. I had more important things to worry about first. The vase was wrapped and put inside a circular canister of sorts. It would be easier to carry with the strap slung over my shoulder. As I exited the shop, I tucked the canister under my arm so that it wouldn't bump into people. I had to be extremely careful with it as the following day my plan would be in motion. Day arrived and made my way to the museum in disguise. Earlier in the week, I had purchased a strawberry blonde wig that was shoulder length and a pair of dark sunglasses from Amazon. As soon as I left the house in my normal attire, I made a sharp left and headed for the alleyway around the corner. Looking around to make sure no family friends were lurking, I removed my hijab and tipped my head upside down. Shaking my hair out, I grabbed it tight and secured it at the base of my neck with a thin elastic. Then I tucked my hair into the wig and stood upright. It felt very glamorous, but I didn't have time to appreciate the novelty. The color of the wig wasn't conspicuous and I chose it because it would help me blend in with the majority of ladies who visited the museum. Slinging the strap of the vase's canister over my arm, I slid the sunglasses on and turned towards the station. Along the way, just outside the train station, I spotted a yellow street bin and reached into my pocket to pull out pieces of the Oyster travel card I had cut up before leaving the house. This card was registered under my personal details and was used on all forms of public transport. Dropping the first few pieces into the bin, I leant down and dropped the remaining pieces into the drain at the side of the road. The sewage water would wash it out to the river soon enough. A few seconds later, I stood at the ticket machine pushing coins through the slot. This was one of the details Vazar and I had spoken about. From today onwards, I had to be careful not to use anything that could be traced back to me. I pushed a button and the machine whirred to life. A second later, my orange paper travel card landed in the plastic window ready for me to begin Phase 2 of the Chapter 26 Phase 2. Phase 2 of the plan required my presence at the museum in the morning. That was the time. The artifacts were due to be moved from the hall to the secured staff area ready for shipment. I had called in sick at school, but not at the museum. I had to keep things as normal as possible for Harry's sake. Had I taken a sick day at work, then Harry would be on high alert waiting for something scandalous to happen. Pretending to be a tourist, I arrived at work through the visitor's entrance and casually picked up a museum map from the information stand. Keeping it open, I used it as an excuse to keep my head down and my face out of sight from the camera secured high above my head. Passing through the door to where my target lay, I double-checked to make sure Vazar was not in his usual spot waiting for me by the door. We had agreed it was best that the cameras didn't catch us together when I was in disguise. Casually walking into the room, I disappeared behind the large shelving unit and extracted the decoy from its canister. I didn't have time to inspect it and gently laid it on the floor. Without missing a beat, I reappeared on the other side and waited for Vazar to do his part. Vazar. She was here. I could sense her. Hannah must have placed the replica behind the shelves by now. I materialized into the room making sure that I stayed invisible. Floating over the drop-off point, I saw an exact duplicate of my prison on the floor. The level of detail on the piece took my breath away. Hannah had done an amazing job of sourcing a talented craftsman who knew what they were doing. Smiling, I bent down and focused my energy on transporting the vase into my prison. There it would sit until the time was right. We had come this far now, and there was no turning back. Hannah. I stood facing the side of the shelving unit pretending to read the inscription on one of the cabinets. My eyes were trained on the replica vase on the floor. In an instant I blinked, and the vase disappeared. Vazar had done his part. I left the hall and proceeded to carry out Phase 3 of the plan. This would be the delicate swap where chances of being caught were high. Back downstairs, I walked out of the building towards the park. There I would wait until Vazar texted me the code word signaling the vase was being moved. Entering the park, I searched for a spot near the gate that wasn't too crowded. Laying down, I pulled out my phone and fired a quick text. Everything okay? Vazar's reply was instant. Yes. Good. That was all I needed to know. Stashing my phone into my pocket, I closed my eyes and tried to breathe normally. So far, I hadn't broken any laws, so I shouldn't be worried. The law breaking would come shortly, and that's when I would need to remain calm. A couple of hours later, my phone chimed. It's a go. The message was simple. Vazar was being moved. I jumped up looking for a large bush to hide behind. I didn't have to look far and found a medium-sized one to squat behind. I removed my wig and buried it somewhere deep in the bush. Then I fixed a short-cropped jet black wig onto my head. Getting all my hair tucked inside was a challenge, and I wished I had started the task earlier. Next, I removed a jumpsuit from my bag and stepped into it. The uniform was provided by the museum and was stored in one of the closets in the staff area. I had stolen it a few days earlier when the fresh batch of laundry had come in. Shortly after, I was entering the staff entrance to the building and walking towards the janitor's cupboard. Taking my key out of my pocket, I opened the door and stashed the canister behind a large pile of toilet paper. It should be fine there for the next hour or so. Satisfied that the canister was well hidden, I proceeded to the handling and packaging room. Good afternoon. I called, doing my best to act like I belonged. The room was a hive of activity with display cabinets lined up against the nearest wall. Are you here to help with the packing? A young lady asked, peering at the clipboard. Yes, I was called in last minute. Apparently there was a shortage of staff, so they sent me. I prayed she wouldn't ask me who they was. What's your name? Sophie. Sophie, I don't see your name on the list. Oh really? I'm only supposed to be working a couple of hours. So, maybe they forgot to put me on the list. Let me work, let me work. I chanted inside my head. My heart was racing in overdrive, and I willed her not to call Harry or anyone else for that matter to double-check. I wasn't sure if my newly acquired powers would work, but I was under extreme pressure, so they might not fail me. I would find out in a bit. Probably I'll call in and check in a bit. Can you start with the first cabinet? Here's the pass card. The gloves are on the table. My powers failed me as the lady hadn't heard my mental plea. However, she did give me access to the room for the time being. For now, that was more than enough, as I calculated I wouldn't need long to carry out my mission. I took the pass card and went over to inspect the table. The gloves were pre-packed and available in various sizes. I didn't notice the soft, velvety fabric as the gloves glided onto my hands. My gaze was focused on the third cabinet in the line that I was so familiar with. There he was. Now the hard part was fast approaching. I opened the first cabinet and watched how the other handlers were preparing the artifacts for shipment. There was bubble wrap, polystyrene and cardboard boxes stacked carefully around the room. I grabbed some bubble wrap and carefully packed the ornament at hand with care. It took a fair while for me to do this, but I had to kill time for Vazar to implement the next part of the plan. Cabinet 2 was painstakingly opened, and work began on its contents at a snail's pace. My heart skipped a beat as I watched the packers ticking boxes on various sheets and logging times into a handheld iPad. I could feel my stomach churning and vomit beginning to work its way up my throat. I inhaled sharply, forcing it back down. Now was not the time to call attention to myself. Baby, are you okay? Vazar whispered into my ear. I jumped and fumbled with the ornament in my hands. Shit. Careful, Sophie. Be very careful. That's a valuable piece. The lady called from across the table. Yes, sorry. I placed the piece on the table and dipped my head low. You scared me, I hissed. How else was I going to tell you I'm here? Vazar whispered back. He had made himself invisible. You have a point. I peeked up from behind the fringe of my wig to assess the other handlers. They were all immersed in their work. I figured it was the right time to try my powers again. Lord knows if I would need them to bail me out of the precarious situation I had put myself in. Look at me. Look at me. I chanted, honing my gaze on the older man at the far end. He didn't flinch. I tried again, forcing my body to send the tailored signals to the man who was locked as my target. Suddenly, the man looked up and we made eye contact. Immediately, I dipped my head, tearing my gaze away. I shuddered with the exertion I had applied. It was so much easier last week when my power had first made itself known. Are you ready? Vazar's voice was at my ear. I nodded discreetly. Phase 3 was now in session. Chapter 27, Phase 3. Excuse me, I'll be right back. I need the bathroom. I called out to no one in particular. A crucial part of the plan relied on the phone call I was about to make. Flicking through the recently called list, I found the name I was looking for. It wasn't far down on the list, as I had called that number only last night to double-check the plan. The call connected after 2 rings. Fatima.
Hey hun.
I'm ready. Is everything okay? Yes. I'll be out shortly. Meet you the same place as we met last time. Great. Heading there now. I hung up feeling grateful. I had called my cousin earlier in the week on the walk home from the station. I told her I needed help and explained the situation with my parents and the marriage proposal they were forcing me into. Naturally, Fatima was horrified and offered to do anything she could to help. We had arranged to meet up shortly after that phone call at the coffee shop up the road. That was when it hit me. I needed her to transport Vazar away from the museum until I could finish my shift and go get him. In it ally, Fatima asked me a lot of questions, but I was reluctant to tell her anything about Vazar at this stage. Firstly, she wouldn't believe me, and secondly, she may refuse to help me smuggle out something that didn't belong to me. I promised her that it was a matter of life or death, and I would tell her everything that night when I met her to collect the vase. Fatima wasn't entirely convinced but agreed to help me anyway. Heading back into the packing room, it was time to make the swap. Vazar had been practicing all week for this moment, and he was confident he could achieve it without any mishaps. I entered the room and left the door slightly open. The handlers were wheeling Vazar's cabinet over to the table and positioned it ready to open. My palms began to sweat, and I gulped down the vomit that had begun working its way up my throat. The pressure was immense, and my body was reacting to the enormity of what I was about to do. Hello there. Vazar's smooth voice was hypnotic. Several pairs of eyes turned towards the door that was ajar. I flicked my eyes towards his cabinet and watched as the handler stood poised with the pass card midair. Yes? How can I help you? The supervising lady piped up from her side of the table. I think the question is how I can help you. Vazar stepped closer. I noticed his eyes had got several shades lighter and were borderline orange. I believe you may need the bathroom, is that right? No. I don't think I do. The lady put down her bubble wrap and stepped closer to Vazar. Yes, you need the bathroom. You will go to the bathroom. You need to use the bathroom. He maintained eye contact with the lady as he planted the idea into her head. I need to use the bathroom, the lady repeated. You all need to use the bathroom. Vazar raised his hypnotic voice and cast his eyes from face to face. I was careful not to look into his eyes from this point onwards. Vazar had explained that his superpower of compulsion worked by making eye contact first. Then his voice would plant ideas in his target's mind. Once the target had carried out his instructions, they always forgot about what had happened and who told them to do it. His power was classed as one of the most influential superpowers known to the jinn kind. Those who abused their power for evil faced the harshest of punishments. The group of handlers shuffled towards the door. As soon as their backs were turned, I dived under the table and plucked the replica from its hiding place. Vazar had put it there the minute I had left to call Fatima. Running over to the cabinet, I swiped my pass card across the hidden lock and watched the door popped open. I completed the swap within 5 seconds. All set. Vazar appeared by my side. Yes, quick, get in. We don't have much time, I urged. Vazar vanished and I lifted the vase from the floor. The original weighed almost the same as the replica. Clutching it to my chest, I hurried out of the room to the janitor's cupboard. There, I was relieved to find the canister in the same position as I had left it. Removing it from its hiding place, I fumbled with the original vase and stuffed it into the circular box. Immediately, I removed the jumpsuit and headed out the visitor's entrance. My heart was in overdrive and sweat poured from my face. I was desperate for a drink of water, but if I stopped now I would lose my courage and collapse onto the floor. As if on autopilot, I navigated my way down the street to the rendezvous point. Hannah! Fatima stood across the street and I jogged over to her. Oh, I'm so glad to see you, I panted. Babe, what's wrong? You look awful. And what's with the wig? I had completely forgotten about my disguise. I don't have much time. I'll tell you later. Here, take this and text me when you reach home safely. Be careful with that. It's fragile. Are you okay? Fatima took the strap from my outstretched hand and swung it over her shoulder. Yes. I'm fine. Thanks, honey. I'll see you later. I kissed her cheek and dashed back across the road. With nausea fighting to take over my body, I jogged back to the museum and found a quiet spot to remove my wig. Looking more like my normal self, I took large deep breaths and composed myself. With my head held high, I entered the staff entrance and greeted the security asking about their day. I was careful to make a point of getting a witness to my entry time into the building. Clearing security, I beelined for the bathroom that wasn't being used by any of the handlers. There in the empty cubicle, I replaced my wig and left for the packaging room. Oh, there you are, Sophie. The lead supervisor was back in her designated spot. Yes, I had to go to the bathroom, sorry. I apologized. Can you help me with this, please? She held up some tape and scissors. I nodded and walked the long way around the table to get to her. Using the extra time, I searched for the replica vase. Thankfully, it was being lowered into a cardboard box that would be sealed in a metal crate within the next few minutes. I breathed a sigh of relief. Now all that was left for me to do was find a way to leave this room and begin my shift as a cleaner. Chapter 28: The Escape. Another 30 minutes ticked by before I announced my shift had ended to the room. You need to sign out with security, Sophie, the supervisor replied. Sure thing. I collected my bag and made my escape from the room. Back in the bathroom, I removed my disguise and changed into my cleaning uniform. My heart hammered with anticipation. The duplicate vase was fully packed and ready to be shipped. There was no way anyone would notice the forgery until it had arrived back in Iraq, and by then I had planned to disappear. The rest of the evening ticked by painfully slow. I took my time in each room on my roster and didn't speak to anyone else for the remainder of the evening. Thankfully, I didn't run into Harry or Miss Saunders, and managed to sign off my shift by 9 p.m. As I left the museum, a wave of tiredness washed over me. My legs were aching, and I calculated the hours I had been on high alert. The day had been exhausting. The emotional stress of the activities at hand were now turning into physical stress. I didn't have time to sit down and breathe as Fatima was waiting for me at the park gates. By now the park would be closed for the day, but it was the only quiet spot where I could explain to Fatima the enormity of what I had done. I spotted her anxiously pacing in front of the gates. The canister was at her feet, standing upright. "Fatima!" I waved. Her face broke out in relief and she enveloped me into a bear hug. "Boy, am I glad to see you. Why? Did something happen?" She was silent for a moment, contemplating her words. "Well, no, nothing happened per se. But I have been so anxious since I collected this vase. Are you going to tell me what this is all about now? Shall we sit down?" I gestured towards the curb. "Here? It's dirty." Fatima's intonation rose a notch. "Believe me, that will be the least of your worries. Sit down, woman. I have a lot to tell you." I picked up the canister and placed it in the road by my feet. Pulling Fatima down next to me, I settled her on the moss-covered pavement. She looked at me quizzically and I knew that was my cue to begin. "Fatima, do you believe in love?" "Oh, so this is what it's about. You are in love?" She giggled knowingly. "Yes, but that's not what today is about. What I am about to tell you will be hard to believe at first, but bear with me, okay?" She nodded. "You can't breathe a word of this to anyone. It's a matter of life or death. Swear to me that you won't tell a soul," I continued urgently. "What is it, hon? You're scaring me." "Okay, so, it started about a month ago. Remember, I went to the museum on that field trip?" "Yeah, the one where you faked your parents' signature." She remembered the event well. "Yes, well, something happened that day. I met someone. The situation is complicated, but this is what happened." I launched into the series of events that led me up to this point. Fatima listened with wide eyes until I got to the part about Vazar being a jinn. "He's a what?" she almost shouted. "A jinn. You remember the stories our parents told us, right?" She nodded, looking like a rabbit caught in headlights. "Are you serious? Hannah, this isn't something you should joke about," she whispered fearfully. "I'm very serious. Listen to the rest of it and then I can prove it to you." I continued on with my story. By the time I was done, Fatima was pacing up and down behind me. I stood up to face her and saw the disbelief on her face. "So now what? You will summon him?" She spread her hands wide. "If you want me to." "Yes." "Go on then, let's see this Vazar." She folded her arms confidently. "Vazar? Can you please show yourself?" I held my cousin's gaze steadily. "Hello, Fatima." He materialized beside me. "Wah!" Fatima leapt into the air. "What the?" She clamped a hand over her chest and panted heavily. I stepped forward and placed a hand on her shoulder. "Are you okay? Am I okay? Am I okay?" She shrieked. "There's a bloody jinn in front of me. Oh my God. How is this happening?" Both hands were pulling at her hair, and she swept her eyes left to right as if searching for the answer midair. "Calm down, Fatima." The thought automatically projected itself out of my mind. Fatima stopped pacing and turned to look at me. No way. That it not happen." I heard her thoughts. "Yes, it did happen. Calm down and listen to me." I crossed my arms and glared at her. "What just happened?" she whispered. "Well, that's the other thing I was going to tell you. I developed the ability to communicate without being vocal." "How? Is it magic? What did he do to you?" Fatima pointed at an amused-looking Vazar. "No, it's not magic. We don't know how this happened. We are guessing it's the combination of the time I am spending with Vazar, and the fact that he materializes me into his vase." Bloody hell. My cousin is possessed, Fatima thought. I heard that. I frowned. Oops. Fatima smiled sheepishly. "So Vazar, what else can you do? Can you materialize a chicken burger for me?" Fatima joked. Vazar chuckled. "No, but if I wasn't attached to the vase, I would have been able to go get you one super fast." "So what do you really look like? Surely this human form is a camouflage." Fatima stepped closer to get a better look. "Well, kind of. If I get angry or let down my guard down at certain times, like when I'm relaxed, then my true self comes through." "Can you show me?" Lord help me if he's ugly, Fatima thought. "I can still hear you." "I snapped to hear." "Can I get a little privacy here? How is one supposed to have any thoughts?" Fatima stamped her foot, making me laugh out loud. "Sure. 1 second." Vazar took several deep breaths and closed his eyes. "What's he doing?" Fatima looked at me. Relaxing. Wait for it. I answered back. There, in the still of the night, Vazar snapped open his eyes that were alive with fire. His hands stretched out by his hips, revealed dark blue lines trailing up his arms and extending along his neck towards his temple. His mouth opened to display a set of sharp fangs that had grown to full size. Crap. Fatima's thoughts reached me as I turned to face her. Her body swayed as if a flag in the wind. Suddenly, her eyes rolled back inside her head and she crumpled to the floor. I raced forward to grab her, but I was too late. She fell to the floor and hit her head hard against the cold, stark pavement. Chapter 29. The Home Visit. Vazar rode the underground train with me in silence, both lost in our own thoughts. I was worrying about Fatima, but once she regained consciousness she assured me she was fine. It was the shock of seeing Vazar's true form that was the icing on the cake of my story. We sat with her for a while making sure she was fine and lucid before separating and continuing our journeys home. Fatima revealed she had found a small room within a house-sharing system towards the west side of London, near one of the large universities. She lived with 3 other girls who were students and studying to become doctors. Fatima was the only girl who worked among them. I learned that my cousin was a temp in London, which meant she hopped from one job to the next as and when the need arose. It gave her a weekly income and flexibility. What are you thinking? Vazar asked me. I squeezed his hand in mine. Just about today. It was a big day. It sure was. Thanks to you, I can now see the world with you by my side. He kissed the side of my head. I closed my eyes happily and laid my head on his shoulder. Yes, we could now go anywhere we wanted. We could be whoever we wanted to be. Yet, a nagging issue was pressing urgently in my head, forcing itself to be addressed. Finance. How would we set ourselves up to live independently? Vazar said he had the finances covered, but I needed to know how. Baby. I know we talked about what would happen now, but can we go over it again? Just so I'm clear. Sure. This week we will stay at your parents' house and you will go to work as usual. I don't think Harry will be around much as he has done his duty by watching me. He thinks I am on my way to the other side of the world now, so he won't be bothering you. When do you think is the right time to leave London? It has to be before the replica reaches Iraq. Yes, you're right there. I'm guessing we have 5 full days from tomorrow before the theft is discovered. The shipment will leave the museum tomorrow morning, go to storage, get processed and then get flown to Iraq. Things are slower over there, so I'm assuming the Iraqi authorities will take their time to deliver the shipment to the rightful owners. Then once it gets back to the owners, they need to assess any damage to the pieces and verify them for authenticity. So, it could take longer than 5 days? It could take weeks for all I know. But to leave in 5 days is the safest bet. We can't have them tracing the theft back to you. I can just imagine. The authorities will interview all the staff members and also analyze the CCTV. They will see straight through my disguise. Do you think they will see you influencing everyone to go to the bathroom? No, they won't see me. I made sure to keep my body behind the door. They would only see the staff talking to a half-open door. That will really confuse them, won't it? I imagined the chaos that would follow from the choice I had made. Lots of people will be questioned, blamed and maybe even fired. There would be a whole lot more paperwork and money spent. The insurance company would pay out and possible relationships between the lenders and the museum broken with mistrust. The butterfly effect began to dawn on me, and I realized the damages would be unforgivable. But, on the other hand, how could I endure the pain of separation from my love? To live a life of misery with no freedom to make choices of my own. I couldn't do it. I would do anything to be with Vazar. Anything. I pulled myself onto his lap and ignored the stares from the other passengers. He was my everything and I wouldn't let anyone else take him away from me. I buried my face into the side of his neck and inhaled deeply. He smelled of Arabic oud and fresh laundry all rolled into one. We arrived at my local train station a short while later, and throughout the walk home I pointed out all the places of interest. The local shops, the park and the various houses of the people I knew. When we reached the top of my road, Vazar placed the canister on the ground and disappeared inside it. Swinging the strap over my shoulder, I hoisted the canister into the air and made my way home. I was aware that the contraband I carried had to remain hidden from my family. There should be nothing left to chance to raise their suspicions when the police came looking for me. I knew they would come. They had to. It would be obvious who the thief was once they viewed the footage over the last month. It was up to me to now protect my family from what was to come. Under no circumstances would I make them accomplices to my theft. Almost home. I whispered to Noon in particular. I opened the front door a crack and listened for movement. It was now almost 11 p.m. and I expected everyone to be in their rooms. The house was silent and I dared to venture in. My room was at the top of the stairs, a mere 60 seconds from the front door, if not less. I stepped into the house and slowly closed the door. Silence. Hurrying up the steps, I was careful to skip step 3 because it was the one step that creaked loudly. I could see my bedroom door ahead. Just a little farther and then I could stash the vase under my bed. There was no other place to hide it as my cupboards were not deep enough. I made it to my bedroom and just as I was about to close the door, the hall light went on. And what time do you call this? Mama stood in her long 92-foot away. Just behind the door, I lowered the canister to the floor and stepped into the hallway. I'm sorry, Mama. The train was delayed in the tunnel and I couldn't call because I had no reception. Delayed for all this time? You should have been home hours ago, Hannah. Now you come at all hours of the night? What will the neighbors think? They will think my daughter is a woman of the night. The shame. Mama's tirade brought out a sleepy Amira from her room. What's going on? She yawned. Your sister has forgotten what time a decent lady comes home. Look at the time. Look. Mama, it wasn't my fault. What did you want me to do? Tell the train driver off. I risked a chance at being cheeky. This is too much. You will leave that job. I will not have you gallivanting around all night. Do you understand? No more job. Mama shook her fist at me. Okay, Mama, I nodded. I was planning on leaving that job anyway. Now go to bed. The boy's family are coming tomorrow to ask for your hand in marriage. Behind me, somewhere in the dark, I heard a sharp intake of breath. Vazar was listening. Chapter 30, The Proposal. Wakey, wakey. Amira crashed through my door around 8 a.m. It was a Saturday morning and I wondered why she was up so early. Go away. I pulled the duvet above my head, eager to get back into a deep warm sleep. Mama wants you downstairs. Akbar's lot are coming for lunch today, and you need to get up and help. Who's Akbar? I opened one eye in curiosity. Your future husband, innit? She called over her shoulder as she skipped out of the room. Iset bolt oprit. The deep sleep I was enjoying vanished as if cold water had been poured over my head. Bloody Akbar was the old man whom my parents wanted me to marry. I had been so exhausted from yesterday's ordeal that I had crashed straight into bed as soon as I closed the bedroom door. Vazar already knew the situation with my potential husband, but what Mama said last night had shocked us both. The formalities were about to begin, which meant that by this afternoon, the groom's side would have asked for permission to marry from my dad. Dad would accept immediately, and then my engagement date would be planned soon after. My heart ached with regret. I didn't want to disappoint my parents, but they were the ones setting themselves up for a massive downfall. Both my parents were well aware that in Islam, children were not allowed to be forced into marriage. It was strictly forbidden. The parents could make suitable spouse suggestions, but the final decision rested with the children. However, in this household, it seemed that my parents were the final decision makers and were leaving me with no choice but to walk in Fatima's footsteps. I thought back to my cousin. She was living her own life, working as and when she wanted and relying on herself to make her life what she wanted it to be. She had refused to marry Akbar because she could see what the future held for her, and she didn't like it. I too needed to forge my own future because living a life in misery just wasn't for me either. Hey babe. Vazar appeared in the far corner of my room. Hey, where did you go? The last I remembered, Vazar was lying behind me, keeping me warm as I drifted off to sleep. I left after the sun came up. I didn't think it was wise for me to stay asleep next to you, seeing as you don't have a lock on the door. Good thinking. Just imagine Amara's face if she saw you here. I shuddered to think of her reaction to finding a man, any man in my bedroom, let alone a jinn in my bedroom. So what's the plan? Vazar asked. I guess I have to get up and help. You're really going to go through with this afternoon? Just tell your parents no. I've already told them no, but they don't listen. Can you try again? One last time? For me. Vazar pleaded. I didn't see any harm in one last time and readily agreed. Once I had freshened up, both Vazar and I made our way downstairs. Vazar had made himself invisible so that he could hear how the conversation would go. Good morning, Mama. I smiled sweetly as I walked into the kitchen. I could sense Vazar idling by the door, but I couldn't be sure of his exact location. His presence was unnerving because I wasn't used to be watched in my own house. Quickly, chop the onions for the meat, Mama instructed as she kneaded some dough. Can I have breakfast first? Then I'll start the preparations, I asked, opening the fridge door. Mama tooted. Be quick. We don't have much time. This was my cue to begin. Mama, why are they coming? I still haven't changed my mind about this marriage. Oh Hannah, not this again. Can't you see I am trying to prepare lunch for everyone? It's bad enough doing this and now your issues on top of everything. But if you cancel lunch then there will no issues at all. I sat down at the table with my bowl of cereal. Cancel lunch? Have you gone mad? They are coming to ask for your hand. How can I cancel such a big event? Mama grunted as she punched the dough. Tell them I don't want to get married. It's as simple as that. Your dad has made a promise. You want him to break it. That promise should never have been made, Mama. Does my happiness mean anything to you? I pleaded. You will be happy, Hannah. This is all for your happiness. You will never have to work again. I looked in the direction of where I thought Vazar was and rolled my eyes. It was clear my parents were not listening. I won't do it. I tried the blunt approach and prayed Mama wouldn't hit me one in front of my boyfriend. I didn't think I could handle the embarrassment. What did you say? Mama's voice was low with malice. I won't do it, Mama. I won't get married. I stood up to gain what little respect I had left. Shall I call your father in, and then we can have this discussion?
Mama tchreatened.
If my dad came in, then the battle would be extremely embarrassing for me. I decided to remain silent. That's what I thought. Now hand me that plate.
Mama instructed.
The guests had arrived, and small chit-chat was underway in the lounge. I was dressed in the traditional Pakistani outfit exuding misery from every pore. Each time I went to offer some food or drink to the guests, Akbar leered at me with narrow, evil little eyes. So Hannah, what do you like to do for fun? He asked as I bent low with a tray full of Indian sweets. I gave him a death stare and remained silent as he selected a bright green sweet. Hannah darling, you're just a bit shy, aren't you? Mama's voice dripped with fake sweetness. I replaced the tray on the table and took my seat opposite Akbar. He was busy slurping his tea, the sound of which was amplified in the quiet room. Geez, am I supposed to put up with this for the rest of my life? I thought to myself in anguish. No, you won't. You are leaving with me. You won't have to see his jerk ever again. Vazar was quick to respond. My eyebrows shot up in surprise. This was the first time we communicated without using our voice. He could hear me just as I could hear him. A thrill of excitement passed over me. You can hear me. This is great. I cried in delight. Yes, your powers are coming in handy right when we need them. Vazar laughed. I hate being here. Look at his face. It's like he wants to eat me. I frowned. I'll teach him. Watch this. Vazar responded. Akbar lifted his teacup to his lips and suddenly his arm jerked, and tea went flying into his face and down his shirt. Akbar gasped. Oh! Mama jumped up and grabbed tissues off the table and frantically dabbed at her guest. Both Amira and I spluttered with laughter. Mama glared at us and continued dabbing at Akbar's narrow chest. The scene that unfolded was comical, and I couldn't take Mama's bulging eyes for the warning that they were. Clutching at my chest, I wheezed with laughter and excused myself from the room. Chapter 31 The Goodbye. It was Monday morning, and I was in my room packing a bag of the most important things I possessed. Sadly, I had nothing I truly valued. No books to call my own. No trinkets and no sentimental items that I simply couldn't live without. I had packed a few clothes and Vazar had materialized them into his vase. Today was the day we would be leaving my parents' house. We couldn't risk staying longer for the authorities to show up and take me into custody. By leaving a few days ahead of schedule, we were buying time for a good head start. Fatima had found us a room on her street and had rented it in her name, so we wouldn't be homeless. The plan was to leave London and settle somewhere that was safe and off the grid, so that no electronic traces of me were left behind. Where are you off to? Amira barged into my room. When will you learn to knock? I asked. When you get married, that's when I'll knock. She teased. Speaking of marriage, what did you think of Akbar? Hate him, I spat. Yeah, he's not much fun, is he? Amira threw herself down on my bed. I turned to look at my sister. Oh, how I would miss her. I would miss her so much and it pained me to leave her behind. For all I knew, my parents would get her married to Akbar next. My heart ached and I sat down beside her, taking her hand in mine. What's going on? Amira was smart. I sighed and organized my thoughts. I opened my mouth to begin and promptly shut it again when I heard Vazar's voice in my head. Don't do it, Hannah. Vazar warned. I nodded. He was right. I couldn't put Amira at risk. She was only young and would never understand what I was going through. She would be left alone here to deal with the aftermath of it all, and the burden on her not to reveal what she knew would be too much for a 15-year-old. Amira, what would you do if you were me? Would you marry Akbar? I asked earnestly. She was quiet for a moment. No, I wouldn't. Then what? What are you going to do? Her eyes were wide with dread. I don't know. Our parents aren't listening. They are not leaving me with much choice, are they? Amira gasped as she understood what I was trying to say. Are you going to leave? I don't want to. I don't want to leave you either, but I can't stay. Her eyes welled up with tears. Please don't go. If I stay, I will be forced into the marriage. If I refuse, our parents might send me away to Pakistan. You know what they are like. She nodded sadly. Will you go and forget about me? I hugged her tight. Never. You are my sister. I would never forget about you. How will I see you? She was crying now. Seeing her pain was unbearable and hot tears formed in my eyes too. We will always FaceTime each other. And when you are out, maybe at school or in town, I will come and see you. You promise? I promise. I will never leave you. Anytime you need me, then I will be there. Okay? I wiped the tears from her cheeks. She sniffed and we hugged again, holding each other tight. This was by far the most painful decision I had to make. Where will you go? Amira asked. To Fatima. I know where she is. I confessed. Fatima? You know where she is? How? I saw her up London and exchanged numbers. But please don't ask me anything else. I promised her I wouldn't tell. She is safe. And happy. She will look after me. Our parents will be so angry when they find out you left. When do you plan on going? This evening. When our parents are at Uncle's house. That is the safest time for me to leave. So soon? Why so soon? She grabbed my hands in hers. I couldn't tell her what was pushing me to leave so soon. The real reason would stay hidden from her until the time was right for both of us. Because the engagement will be in a few days. Then the marriage would follow soon, and everyone would be on high alert. They might be expecting me to follow Fatima's actions and ground me until the wedding. It's best I go now. Amira pushed the heels of her palms into her eyes. I could see she was overwhelmed with the idea of my leaving. I wish I had more time with her so she could get used to it, but I couldn't risk staying any longer. I love you, Hannah, she whispered behind her hands. I love you too, my sweet sister. I folded her slight frame into my arms as we both sobbed quietly. The evening came around quick. I had packed a small selection of clothes and shoes into Vazar's vase. My nerves were frayed just like they had been on the day of the museum theft. Both my parents had just left the house to walk the short distance to Uncle's house. It was time for my escape. Pulling the canister from under the bed, I swung it onto my shoulder and popped my head around Amara's bedroom door. It's time, I said softly. She rose from her bed and followed me down the stairs. Are you sure you want to do this? She asked me. I have no choice. Once the dust settles, let me know what the parents are saying, will you? She nodded. Come here. I pulled her into a tight hug and felt the tears well up again. Okay, go before we start crying again. Amira pushed me towards the door. Goodbye, I whispered, kissing her cheek. Bye. Take care of yourself. Amira opened the door and watched me as go until I was nothing but a small speck down the street. Are you okay? Vazar appeared beside me as I turned the corner. I wiped away the tears that were free falling down my face and swallowed the lump in my throat. I couldn't speak and swallowed hard again. My voice had left me to suffer in silence. I'm okay. I projected the words from my mind. Did you text Fatima that we are on the way? He took the canister strap from my shoulder. I will text her from the train. Okay, he replied. Understanding my emotional state, Vazar took my hand in his, and we walked the rest of the way in silence towards our new destiny. A future together where no one could keep us apart. Chapter 32, The Call. By nightfall we were settled into our new home. A room within a house-sharing facility that comprised of 4 bedrooms and a shared kitchen and bathroom. The house itself was a bright, white building that was 3 stories tall with a small garden at the front. Our bedroom was on the 2nd floor, and faced the rear garden that was paved over with concrete slabs. It wasn't one of the best views to have, but we weren't planning on staying there long enough to enjoy it. Our new home. Vazar came up behind me and put his arms around my shoulders. We both stood staring at our reflection in the window. The darkness of the evening provided the perfect backdrop to transform the window into a mirror. We really should be looking at options for a permanent home. Somewhere that is safe and a little isolated. I know of a few places like that. Vazar bent his head low and nuzzled the side of my neck. Yeah, but do you know of any near the portal? It's better we stay somewhere close by. In Dorset? Yes, I think I've seen some cottages along the coast. Surely they must be more built by now. We could go take a look this week. I nodded. The idea of living along the coast was enchanting. I imagined early morning walks along the cliff tops and the freedom to come and go as I pleased. But all the freedom in the world wouldn't help if we had no income coming in to sustain us. I turned to face Vazar. Can we talk about finances? How are we going to rent a cottage? We would need to buy a car too so I can get to work easily. Vazar dropped his arms from my shoulders and took my hand, leading me to the two-seater sofa. He pulled me down onto his lap. Money doesn't have the same value to us jinns as it does to you humans. Don't worry about money. There's plenty of it at home. But I just need to figure out a way to get there first. Home? As in Jumana? Vazar nodded. The jinn kind have access to a lot of money. It's traded among us for other more valuable things like superpowers, favors and experiences, the things we need when we have a lot of years ahead of us. If I could just get through the portal and go home, I could bring enough of it back to last us a few years. How can you go back when you are attached to this damn vase? I asked, jutting my chin out at the canister that was perched on the round dining table. That's what we need to figure out. He scratched his chin and thought. Could you not carry the vase with you? That way you can move around wherever you want. I suggested. No, the imprisonment doesn't work that way. I cannot carry the vase on my own. If you were walking beside me then yes, I can because you were the one to move the vase initially. But alone the vase would just stay rooted to the spot. I wouldn't be able to move it. Can you try? Carry the vase out of the room. I instructed. Vazar shook his head. I've tried 1,000,000 times. The vase just doesn't budge. Then the only option is I go with you. Take me through the portal. As the words left my mouth I wished I could take them back. I wasn't ready to be surrounded by a different species, particularly one which was known for being malevolent. Vazar looked at me with interest. You would do that? Go into my world knowing all the dangers? I hesitated. I don't know. I don't think I want to go, but what choice do we have? Rob a bank. Oh, so a museum wasn't enough for you, was it? Now you want to be the next Bonnie and Clyde. How do you know anything about Bonnie and Clyde? I asked, thoroughly intrigued. I do read, you know. I've read all the classics. Vazar answered smugly. I was impressed. I loved his eagerness to read and learn more about the world. So what will it be? Jumana or a bank? Vazar asked. Are you serious? I stood up, crossing my arms. We are not robbing anyone or anything. It's not right and you know it. The only reason I took the vase was because you were in it. I pouted, not quite believing if Vazar was serious or not. Of course I'm not serious. I am not a criminal. He stood up and rubbed the tops of my arms with vigor. I took a deep breath. Jumana it is. A muted beep sounded from the kitchen table and I went over to inspect my phone. Dozens of missed calls were listed from every member of my family. A few text messages on WhatsApp begging me to answer my phone appeared in the widget I had set up to preview messages. I longed to call Amira and ask her how things were, but we both agreed that our parents would have taken her phone and pretended to be her to lure me out of my decision to flee. I hoped Amira was okay in all this and not being hounded for information just like Uncle had done to me when Fatima fled. My phone vibrated in my hand. The number appeared as unknown. That was strange as everyone else who had called me had their names on display. I held up the screen so Vazar could see. Who do you think that is? He asked mentally. It can't be anyone in my family. I don't think they know how to disable caller ID. I answered. Answer it, he said. I pressed the green button on the screen and held the phone up to my ear. Silence. I waited a beat longer and then prompted. Yes. No answer. I hung up and shrugged. Prank call, I guess. Before Vazar could respond, my phone buzzed to life once more. Unknown flashed across the screen like an angry red flag. I held up one finger against my lips to let Vazar know not to speak and answered the call. Hello. There was a beat of silence before somewhere far off, a very faint, raspy voice spoke. The three simple words that traveled down the phone lines chilled me to the core and my eyes went round with fear as the meaning resonated in my head. We found you. Chapter 33, The Accomplished. The blood ran cold in my veins. Who had found us? Vazar? What the hell is going on? Who could that be? I shrieked, dropping the phone onto the table. I have no idea. It could be anyone. What if it's my kind? He began pacing around the room, biting his lip. I hadn't seen him this anxious before. If he was anxious, then that meant this matter wasn't to be taken lightly. What if it is your kind? Oh my God. We are in so much trouble if they really have found us. I was practically shouting as I raced to the light switch and plunged us into darkness. What are you doing? Vazar asked, confused. Checking out the window. What if we are being watched? From the garden? Hannah, If they are my kind, then you will never see them. Vazar laughed because that was the only thing he could do at that point. What should we do? I asked, switching the light back on and looking around the room. We should leave. I answered my own question. Yes, we have to leave. Vazar's face was grim. Where do we go? A hotel. For now, yes. We need to leave right now. Get your stuff together. There is no way we are staying. Vazar threw my jacket at me and began gathering our belongings. We worked in silence as fast as we could do, pack what little we had. Heading down the stairs, I pulled my phone out of my pocket and searched up reasonably priced hotels. The night breeze hit us full force as Vazar pulled open the door. We stepped outside into the cold and I closed the door softly behind us. Before we could take another step, Vazar paused. I had seen this stillness once before and I knew something was wrong. Baby, get back inside. Quick, Vazar instructed, pushing me back through the front door. Soon as he was inside, he slammed the door and let out a big breath. We both stood in the narrow hallway, breathing heavily with dreaded anticipation. Who's there? I asked. My kind. His answer was blunt. I knew this would be trouble. Surely they had found out Vazar wasn't where he was supposed to be and tracked us down to West London. How did they find us? I hissed. I don't know, but I guess we are about to find out. There was a sharp rap of knuckles on the glass pane which was built into the door. Don't answer, I looked at Vazar. They know we are here. How long can we hide? He shook his head slightly. I guess Vazar was right. It wasn't like we were hiding from human beings. We couldn't just sneak out the back door and run. These were jinns who were after us. They had unimaginable powers between them and nothing or no one could hide from them. During our escape plan, we predicted the jinn kind wouldn't know Vazar was missing until the shipment arrived in Iraq and was unpacked. But somehow, they had found out earlier and sent their kind to find us. And boy did they find us fast. Who is it? Vazar shouted through the door. Ah, my boy. There you are, came the familiar voice. Harry, I gasped. How did he know where we were? What do you want, Haza? Well, my child, I thought that would be a tad obvious, is it not? He chuckled. Now open the door and let's reach a solution. I am not opening this door. Tell the elders I will serve my sentence as agreed. They have nothing to worry about. Ah, nothing to worry about? Vazar, my boy, you have attracted a young girl who seems to have no qualms about breaking the law for you. I wonder what else she is willing to do for you. I could see Harry's silhouette through the glass rocking back and forth. As long as I am with her, you have nothing to worry about, we won't be any more trouble. Vazar responded. My child, your sentence should be served in solitude, not with a newfound romance blossoming. Open the door, Harry's voice was almost paternal. Vazar looked at me. We can't stay here forever and they won't go away either. I have to open the door. I nodded and watched as the front door swung open. Harry stood with two other entities who could have been twins. Standing tall at 6 feet 2 inches, Harry's henchmen were built for business. That's more like it, my boy. Harry slapped one hand on Vazar's shoulder. I think it best if both of you come with us, We will take a little trip. Where are we going? Vazar reached out and grasped the door, blocking Harry's way into the corridor. The elders would like to have a word, Harry sneered, looking meaningfully at me. What do they want to talk to me about? Vazar stood his ground in the hallway. Not you. Her. They want to speak to her. Harry jutted his chin towards me. Several pairs of feline-like eyes turned towards me. My mouth opened but no words came out. I was being summoned by the elders. I didn't want to go. I was petrified. What did they want to talk to me about? I was just a mere human. Humans are not allowed entry into Jumana, Harry. Why is she being summoned? Vazar wanted answers. Yes, humans rarely are given permission to enter Jumana. But some exceptions are made, Vazar. Your girlfriend is one of those exceptions. Why? What makes her that exception? Well, if you came with us, then you would find out, wouldn't you? Harry's voice took on a no-nonsense tone and Vazar knew it was a losing battle. He sighed and held out a hand for me to take. I took Vazar's outstretched hand, begging him to put a stop to this. Baby, we don't have a choice. If we don't go, then Harry won't leave without us. Vazar looked into my eyes, willing me to understand. He can't force us to go with him. I dug my heels in. Oh yes, he can. You see the two guys with him? They are known as the accomplishers. A bit like henchmen. They have the power to immobilize you and force you to go wherever they want you to go. Let them try. I cried. I will not go. Vazar shook his head. Let's go. He tugged my hand forwards, leading the way out the door. I pulled away and stepped back into the hallway. I'm not going, I shouted and took 2 steps backwards towards the stairs. Child, do not make this any more difficult. Harry stepped into the hallway. Just as my foot touched the first step, a tugging sensation began in my spine. I tried to lift my other foot to climb the stairs, but my body felt like it was underwater. My mind began to slow down, and I felt waves of dizziness wash over me. Then I was falling backwards ever so slowly. I landed midair of an invisible cushion of softness and melted into it. Sleep was beckoning. It was the sweetest sensation I had ever felt. I was fast losing consciousness, and I knew then that the accomplishers were well and truly accomplished at doing their job. Chapter 34 The Portal. Someone was carrying me. The motion of being rocked ruthlessly pulled me from a cotton candy sleep that I longed to get back to. I woke up with birds squealing overhead and the bright morning sun shining in my eyes. Forcing them open, I peeked up through my lashes at one of the henchmen carrying me in his arms. I lifted my head and was surprised to see that we were on a beach. Soft sand and small rocks crunched underneath my carrier's feet. His long strides jarred me even more, forcing me to become alert, until I was fully lucid. Let me go. I kicked my feet in the air. The henchman grunted and immediately stopped walking. It's okay. Put her down. You know what to do if she runs, Harry sung cheerfully from somewhere up ahead. My feet sank into the airy sand and I righted myself with as much dignity as I could muster. Where are we? I looked around for Vazar. He was up ahead with Harry. Next to me were the 2 henchmen and waited for Harry's orders to keep moving. Near the portal. Come on, we don't have long to go. Harry began walking and my eyes followed his path. Up ahead was the most beautiful rock formation I had ever seen. A small arch sat on the end of a piece of land that jutted out into the sea. Above the rocky wall, several patches of grass and moss grew from the thousands of crevices that added texture to the landmark. Vazar walked back towards me and took my hand in his. Come on. His words jolted me out of my observations. Where's the portal? I asked. There. It will appear in that arch. He inclined his head towards the sea. But that arch is in the water. Are we going into the water? My heart thudded with anxiety. My swimming skills were almost non-existent. My family hadn't bothered with this basic survival skill because the swimming pool centers around our area were predominantly mixed with both men and women sharing pool times. There were some ladies-only classes, but my parents never bothered to take us and in turn we didn't ask to go either. Yes, we need to get into the water. Is that okay? I stopped walking. No, it's not okay. None of this is okay. I can't swim. I almost burst into tears. The emotional events of the morning were beginning to take its toll. Vazar ran a thumb over my cheek reassuringly. It's fine. The water isn't that deep. If you feel uncomfortable at any point, then climb onto my back. I'll carry you. We continued to walk until we were at the edge of the dull, bluish-gray water. The arch was to our left and the cliffs to our right. We were standing in a small, tight cove that would have been a hidden gem if there weren't any sun worshippers on it. I looked over my shoulder at the handful of people sunning themselves on beach towels and devouring the breakfast picnics that they brought with them. Won't they see the portal opening? I asked Harry. No, they won't see anything. They can't even see us. We have blanketed ourselves to remain unseen. Harry was the first to step into the water. Blanketed? Who says that? I laughed mirthlessly. It means disguised. Haza speaks a different language to us. Don't worry, you will get used to it. Vazar tugged me into the water and I let out a shriek. It's freezing. I jumped back from the waves lapping at my feet. Of course it's freezing. Harry shouted over his shoulder. This is England, not the Bahamas. I'm not getting in there. I crossed my arms defiantly. Shall I ask my men to assist you, my dear? Harry laughed. I frowned. If his men put me to sleep again, then I would miss witnessing the rare opportunity of seeing a portal open up onto a new world. I doubted anyone from my generation or even the last several generations had the privilege of seeing what I was about to see. I stepped into the water again and the iciness washed over my ankles. I took another step and the water brushed against my calves. I shrieked again but stood firm. The rest of the men wandered into the water as if it was a warm bath. The frigidness didn't bother them in the slightest. I took another tentative step and the water rose above my knees. I couldn't do it. My teeth began to chatter, and I clasped my hands together in front of my chest to stop my arms from shaking. The wind picked up and the water turned choppy, lashing against my legs as I wobbled in place. I looked down at the gray water bursting with foam and wondered if I could be put to sleep instead. Are you okay? Vazar whispered as he appeared before me. I'm cold, I stammered as the wind whipped my hair across my face. I could taste the salt from the sea. I got you. Vazar reached for me and lifted me out of the water. He pulled me closer to his body so that my legs were wrapped around his waist. Placing my arms around his neck, I held on as he ventured deeper into the salty water. The cold engulfed us until we were standing shoulder deep in its clutches. Away from the tall cliffs that acted as windbreakers, the wind howled louder out in the open expanse of the sea. I couldn't hear the chants that Harry had begun reciting. His arms rose parallel to his shoulders and shook with emotion as his calls were lost in the wind. His two companions joined him in the recitals, and suddenly, a small speck of light appeared dead center of the arch. My eyes widened. Was this the portal? As the three men chanted and called upon the elements, the portal began to expand and breathe a life of its own. Static electricity, in various shades of purple, black and gray, spun a web of designs that filled the entire arch. I released my grip of Vazar and dropped into the water like a heavy stone. The water lapped against my nose and I bounced in place to breathe. The stunning display before me was breathtaking. I was in awe, witnessing a true miracle. Who would have thought it possible? Hold on. Vazar's arms encircled my waist as he pulled me into his chest. There was a flash that almost blinded me, and as a reflex I closed my eyes. The next instant, the air shifted around me and the wind stopped howling. The frigid water that engulfed my body gave way to a warmer climate, and I opened my eyes and gasped. Chapter 35. Their world. There were not enough words in the English language to describe what I was seeing. Jumana was spectacular. We had arrived in a forest of sorts. Tall green trees cast long shadows on the grass. Behind us a waterfall of crystal-clear water descended from somewhere high above. The dirt path under our feet glowed reddish-brown with a natural material I had never seen before. A yellow butterfly-looking creature fluttered past my face, and I ducked, hoping it wouldn't fly into my hair. Are you okay? Vazar asked, appearing next to me.
I'm fine.
It's just a butterfly, I think. It's actually similar to your standard fly you have at home. That's a bigger version of it. Vazar stated matter-of-factly. Come along, no time for chit-chat. Harry led the way down the path and we dutifully followed. The trees gave way to a large space and we emerged from the depths of the forest into a village. The houses were tall, made of a solid-looking stone. There were no gardens leading up to the dwellings. It was as if the houses were built with immediate access into the forest. Vazar tapped me on my shoulder, and I looked over at him. He pointed upwards and I followed his finger. High above in the trees there were more houses. These houses varied in size and were scattered throughout the tops of the trees. It reminded me of the wooden tree houses we had at home, except these ones were life-size, made of stone, and were all connected with a shimmery walkway that looked as if it was made from a rainbow of glittery water. Back on the ground, we weaved in and out of buildings and trees, passing the jinn folk who all stared at me with suspicion. It was clear I wasn't one of them because they all had deep lines of blue running through their skin. The majority of them had orange eyes, but I did manage to notice other colors such as indigo and full-on black when I made eye contact. As I passed them, I heard the gossip begin. Eager chatter started, but it wasn't in a language I could understand. It sounded foreign, unlike any other language I heard. What language is this? I threw the question at Vazar. That's our national language. We only speak that here. Vazar replied. I noticed that he had moved closer to me, and placed a protective arm around my shoulders as if expecting something bad to happen to me. A small jinn child broke away from his group and ran over to me. He pointed one long finger at my face and chattered excitedly as if seeing something of interest at a zoo. So this is what zoo animals feel like, I grumbled to Vazar. He laughed but remained silent as one of the henchmen shooed the boy away. For the moment I felt apprehensive, but with all the activity going on around me, I soon forgot my anxiety and eagerly drank in my new surroundings. The scenery changed once more and the trees almost vanished. We were now approaching a conveyor belt that was made of the same glittery water as I saw within the forest. Harry stepped onto it with an experienced finesse, and I clumsily followed, holding onto Vazar in an effort not to fall. The belt carried us deep into the city, and I just stood gaping at the extraordinary environment, as if I was on an African safari. Beautiful, isn't it? Vazar smiled at me. Incredible, I breathed. Remarkable technology was evident all around me. Electronic holograms, advertising experiences shimmered at various points, and many jinn kind chose to use hovering boards to get around the city. These devices effortlessly glided high above my head, and I wondered how they didn't fall off. Why don't you guys have cars? I asked Noon in particular. Harry chuckled. We don't need them, my child. Look around you, our kind can materialize wherever they want. If they choose to walk, then we have these walkways. He stamped a foot on the belt we were on. I can see some of your kind on hoverboards. I pointed into the pale pink sky. For leisure, for leisure. Something for fun. Harry cast a withering glance upward. I gathered he wasn't a fan of this method of transportation. Soon enough, we stepped off the belt and switched to a darker one with a little less sparkle. The belt felt kind of somber after all the color I had witnessed earlier. We began a speedy ascent until we were swallowed by a gaping mouth of a colossal glass structure. The building was the tallest one I had ever seen in my life, with the top of it disappearing into the sky. Where are we going? I wondered. This leads into the headquarters of the elders. Their office is somewhere up there. Vazar flicked his gaze upwards. We stepped off the belt and I looked upwards. The ceiling was nowhere to be seen, but I did see several shimmering tubes run up and down the length of the building. It took me a moment to realize that they were lifts, with jinns inside, traveling up and down to different floors. This demonstration of super technology astounded me as I noted there were no mechanics. The lifts were moving without any cables or weights attached. How do these lifts work? I asked Vazar. Remember the advanced technology one told you about? Well, that's how they are powered. I didn't have time to ponder his vague answer, as Harry guided us to a stop somewhere in the middle of the foyer. A near-invisible lift silently descended and opened up in front of us. The tube silently whisked us straight up and my ears popped with the rising pressure. Suddenly, the tube shifted sideways and traveled in a straight line into one of the extending arms of the building. The sudden change in direction threw me, and I careened into one of the henchmen who stood rooted in place. This lift goes sideways? I shrieked, thoroughly alarmed. Noon responded to my question as we had stopped in front of a smaller corridor, and the lift doors opened onto a floor made of pale blue and pink cloud. I am not stepping on that. I wondered if I would fall right through the cloud. It's perfectly safe, baby. Come on. Vazar took my hand and stepped out onto the cloud floor. His feet disappeared, but the rest of his body was still visible. I stepped out of the lift and into the cloud. The bottom was firm, and it felt like the same substance used at concerts to add a touch of ambience. What is the point of this smoke? I reached down to brush it away. I wanted to see the ground. Blow the smoke away, Vazar instructed. I took a deep breath and blew. The smoke parted and I almost vomited in my mouth. There was no hard surface supporting my weight. My feet rested on thin air and far down below I could see tiny jinns going about their business. We are ready for you now. A pair of delicate legs materialized near my face. I stood up and the smoke closed around me once more. The female jinn facing me gave a professional smile and held out her hand, showing us the way into the main room. She was smartly dressed in a black shirt with long sleeves that almost touched the cloud floor. Her hair was cut into a sharp bob and her eyes glowed a deep shade of violet. She was breathtakingly beautiful. Here we go. Vazar took my hand once more and led me down the corridor and through a set of large double doors that wouldn't have looked out of place as the gates of an opulent